All right, today we are talking about a problem staring Big 12 schools in the face right now and for the foreseeable future. That is recruiting in the midst of conference realignment. It's the type of thing that can take the national narratives about the Big 12 and turn them into self-fulfilling prophecies. Welcome into the YouTube channel. I am John Kurtz. Thanks to each and every one of you who subscribe. If you're a college football fan, I would highly encourage you to subscribe, particularly if you're a Big 12 fan. I try to give the Big 12 a voice here, and we talk college football and conference realignment right now every single day. Also, if you like and comment on the videos, that helps me out a lot as well. So we found out again last Friday about the alliance between the ACC, the Big 10, and the Pac-12 that is brewing, and that makes it even tougher for the Big 12 right now to think about its future. Big 12 seems closer and closer to getting left at the kiddie table and away from the big boy table for the rest of college football eternity, perhaps. Not only that, but it doesn't seem like there will be firm answers on where each of these schools is going to wind up. Will they be able to stay together? Will they find a life raft somewhere else, which seems like a near impossibility right now? Gene Taylor, K-State's athletic director, came on this channel last week and said he would be shocked if anything happens within the next year. Max Olson from The Athletic has been on this channel and said he would be very surprised if anything happens anytime soon. So that creates a very unstable, uncertain environment. There are no sure answers. They're not coming soon. How do you recruit with that cloud of uncertainty hanging over you? Uncertainty is the worst thing you can have on the recruiting trail, as evidenced by the fact that coaches nearing the end of their contracts always get that extra extension. Even if it's just really for show, they will get an extension with years added on to the end because they don't want to have to go out on the recruiting trail and say, hey, I've only got 1 year left of my contract. Don't know if I'm going to be here for the rest of your career. Ultimately, that's kind of silly because coaches we know can leave very easily. They can be fired very easily, and none of that really matters. But parents, recruits may not be as invested in the sport to understand that, so it can be something that's used against you in a negative recruiting light. So typically, you'll see that contract extension happen. That tells you everything you need to know. And there's nothing more uncertain than conference realignment, right? This is on a whole nother level. The fact that you don't know where it is that you're going to be playing next year, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, etc. And we've already seen this pop up as a problem. If you just go back August 9th, that's over a week ago. That's obviously pre-Big 12, Pac-12, ACC Alliance. There was one coach that anonymously told The Athletic, quote, "It's killing us right now," one Big 12 coach said. "It's absolutely, no doubt, hurting us." And again, that was back before we got worse news on the Big 12 front here. So you know that it's impacting these coaches. And I think a good way to do this is take a case study. Let's look at the Oklahoma State Cowboys. Okay, this is a program that's been remarkably consistent under Mike Gundy. If we're going based on football resume, they deserve to have as good a chance as anybody remaining in the league to find a landing spot. But to do so, they do need a certain amount of talent. I mean, this program recruits at a top 30-ish level. If you go back the last 5 years, their rivals classes and where they wind up in the team rankings, they're somewhere in the 30s typically, as low as 40, but usually in the 30s. Pretty good recruiting for Oklahoma State. They dip into Texas to do a lot of their damage. Well, think about the double-edged sword that's going on here. Number one, you don't know what conference you're going to be playing in for the foreseeable future. That's a very easy one. If you're negatively recruiting against them, you can say, hey, Robert Allen, their sideline reporter, came on this John Kurtz guy's YouTube channel and said they've already reached out to the 4 other conferences. So it could be those 4 conferences. It could be a revamped Big 12. It could be the American Athletic Conference. It could be the Mountain West. Kid, there's maybe 7 conferences you could be playing in at this school. If you come to, say, Arkansas, all right, who's probably going to be recruiting the state of Texas, you know you'll be playing in the SEC. You know you'll be playing in the dominant college football conference. You don't have to deal with any of that uncertainty, not knowing where it is. You'll have to travel for games, not knowing if your parents will be able to travel to see those games. You see the picture that can be painted here on a negative recruiting front. And the double-edged part of that sword is now that Texas and Texas A&M are both in the SEC, in the state of Texas, that just got that much more competitive because the SEC is going to be coming in even hot and heavier in the state of Texas now that they have an extra added presence there. So, man, I think about Oklahoma State and Mike Gundy and how much more difficult that job just became. But it's not just Oklahoma State. I mean, there are a lot of schools with some real momentum on the recruiting trail in the league right now. If you look at the 24/7 class rankings, West Virginia is number 19. Iowa State is number 25. Baylor 26. Oklahoma State 29. It's a lot of schools with some real momentum built up there. How much does this really put a roadblock on all of that, especially after all these schools just dealt with trying to recruit through COVID, which is difficult enough? And Iowa State's a particularly brutal example because how long have they fought and scrapped through bad seasons and got things up and rolling now with Matt Campbell? They're embarking on the most hyped season in school history, and they already have the dark cloud of realignment hanging over them. Now it's going to hang over the recruiting trail and the momentum that Campbell has built up there. And they have done a great job on the recruiting trail. I think this is the type of thing that could certainly slow them down. Now, in fairness, Matt Campbell is saying all of the right things, as are most Big 12 coaches right now, which they have to project some confidence. And this was pretty great. I appreciate the Iowa State fan that put this together with the Tupac music in the background. But here's what Matt Campbell had to say when he was asked about trying to recruit through this.
What's a guy tell recruits at this point when there's that uncertainty out there?
We win, and we'll work to continue to win. And if you want to play for a winning team, come play for us.
Now, Chris Kleiman, who I get a chance to talk to on a weekly basis at his press conference, answered very similarly when he was asked this past week about it as well.
Kansas State's still going to play football, and we're still going to play Power 5 football, and we're going to have a great schedule, and I'll let the people that are above me figure out how that's all going to happen.
So kudos to the coaches for handling this well publicly. That's what they have to do. But internally, we've already seen from that athletic quote that it is affecting them. And look, you just have to imagine and understand that it is going to affect them moving forward. And the problem here is the narrative is already so far out there that, hey, nobody else in the Big 12 can recruit or generate money or do much of anything outside of Texas and Oklahoma, even though we are seeing, as evidenced by those 4 classes we mentioned, that these schools can hold their own on the recruiting trail. Oklahoma State can hold its own in terms of TV viewing numbers. And really, outside of the top 10 to 15 brands in college football, namely the top 2 to 3 brands in every single conference, nobody really draws all that well. So these schools are not in a different position really than the rest of the college football world if the same thing were happening and they were kneecapped by losing their top brands. And the frustrating part here is that this turns into a self-fulfilling prophecy. We've seen an article from The Athletic outlining the recruiting numbers, and look, how is the Big 12 going to recruit without Oklahoma and Texas? That narrative gets out there. These schools can't recruit. These schools can't recruit. They can't generate money. They can't do this. And everybody just looks down upon the conference. And then, lo and behold, yes, it is going to be harder to recruit without Texas and Oklahoma. Now these schools won't pull in as highly rated kids. They won't win as much on the football field. And bam, you've just had this whole domino effect that all started by ESPN working the back channels to help get Texas and Oklahoma to the SEC. So look, I've never been one that's really that media conspiratorial, but there is definitely something to all of this, how this has started. The ESPN propping up the SEC over the last 10 to 15 years. Everybody looking down upon the Big 12, ESPN helping get Texas and Oklahoma out. And now everybody else, the remaining 8, are left to deal with the consequences, namely here in recruiting. So it is maddening. It is frustrating. I hope that these schools in the league can continue to recruit well, but there's no doubt these questions will be tough to answer in the future. I guess, honestly, in the end, it all reinforces something that I did hear K-State AD Gene Taylor say recently, and that is it's a good year to have a good year. It would be a perfect time for all of these schools to have great seasons on the football field this year to help out in the short term and in the long term. Again, on this channel, I talk college football every single day. Big 12 football, conference realignment, that's the focus right now. Please do subscribe if you haven't. Like and comment on the video. It helps me out a ton as well. You can follow me on Twitter. It's at JL Kurtz, JLKURTZ. You can listen to my daily radio show, The Game KMAN. Just search for that on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and you can find that there. I appreciate all of you guys for following along, and I'll talk to you soon.